If you think about it, Kevin Holland is sort of the next Anderson Silva.
Yeah.
An Anderson Silva 7.0, if you will.
Wow. They're really getting along.
It's like the iPhone. Just constantly coming up with vital improvements.
Yes, every one better than the last.
Yeah. They removed the dongle from Silva 5.0.
Yeah. Yeah, this time instead of instead of a headphone jack, they've removed copious amounts of skill.
Everyone was like, hey, I liked that my iPhone was smart. And they're like, no, they don't need that anymore. Trust us.
This one just shouts helpful advice at you the whole time. The virtual assistant that just will not shut the fuck up.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush, and with me, as always, is Philma Kenzie. Philma, how you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. We've gotten a brief break this time.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting back into the swing of things with an event which is okay.
I'm going to give it a resounding okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I'm not breaking down the whole thing like certain members of this podcast will be.
You always...
It's long. It's long.
How many times
How
did
many
you...
fights is this one?
What's that? How many fights?
15 fights, oh my god.
Yep. 6-fight main card.
Yeah.
3 middleweight fights on there. One of them including
yes.
Sam Alvey. Honestly, though, I feel like the main card is pretty damn solid.
Yep, Sam Alvey and Julian Marquez, who's going to try and...
Oh my god.
He's going to have to work hard to put down a bigger L than he already has this year.
You know what? What, you mean the weird post-fight interview?
The whole Miley Cyrus thing.
Oh yeah, my god. What a humiliation. The type of thing that would make the most academic, least sexually interested man say, bro. Come on. Yeah, though, the main card, I was gonna say, it just occurred to me that Sam Alvey is gonna knock Julian Marquez out. That will be very funny. But, this main card is looking pretty good. And we are definitely going to hit 3 fights from it, and then we've got a short list, essentially, of preliminary fights to get to if we have time. So I will let our listeners know that we will, of course, be discussing the main event, Marvin Vettori versus, once again, short notice replacement, Kevin Holland. Co-main event, I'm really looking forward to this one, Arnold Allen versus Sadiq Yusuff. It seems to me like sort of a fight made for Yusuff to win, and yet I expect it to be intensely competitive and grimy the whole way through. So that should be great. And then Nina Ansaroff is making her return after pregnancy and childbirth and over 2 years almost away from the octagon. I don't think she's fought since mid-2019, and she's taken on Mackenzie Dern on the main card, so that should be an interesting fight as well. I'm very curious to see if how Ansaroff looks after a long layoff. So yeah, we're gonna get into those 3, and then I'll just reserve the undercard fights we were thinking of until we have occasion to actually talk about them. Without further ado, Phil, the main event: Marvin Vettori, Kevin Holland. Go ahead and make that sound I know you want to make, knowing, as you do, that I really want Kevin Holland to win. I thought it was going to be more of a, it's another one of those where,
It is, though, isn't it?
It's another one of those.
Kevin Holland does have a path to victory and greatness in the 185 pound division, but it's an era 1, and I don't know if it goes through Marvin Vettori.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I still have a small but firm belief that Kevin Holland could win this fight, as I still think, looking back. Looking back, I'm not like, oh, that Derek Brunson fight is unwinnable for Kevin Holland. It's just that, like, being who Kevin Holland is. Like, I do still think there may be a moment where Kevin Holland just takes a fight intensely seriously. And it alters his preparation, it alters his attitude in the fight, it alters his sort of sense of urgency. But being that Kevin Holland has been Kevin Holland for his entire life, going on 28 years now, one assumes he's gonna get tired and probably out-wrestled again, and just maybe not do enough to keep up with the fact that Marvin Vettori is arguably the most consistent round by round fighter in the middleweight division.
That is true. He is monstrously consistent.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he doesn't have the specific kind of wrestling and top game of Jacare or Brunson. But what he does have is, well, he still has a good wrestling and top game.
Yes.
But he also has insane durability.
Yes, something Derek Brunson.
He's another one of these guys where I've very, very rarely seen him hurt. The man is just a block of increasingly weird-looking muscle.
Yes. There's some sort of new genes at work in Marvin Vettori's torso.
And he is, with the whole shaven head thing, he's really pushing on into, like, freak of nature territory. It's not working well for him.
Yeah, sort of a Bane kind of vibe for Marvin Vettori. I would love to see him bulk up all the way to heavyweight. I want to see what Marvin Vettori looks like with just the biggest, poofiest Italian muscles you've ever seen.
I'm thinking what it might be that, like, disconcerts me so much about people with that particular aesthetic, so like him and Josh Emmett. I think it might have been playing Fight Night Champion.
Yeah, yeah.
And the parts at the beginning where you just have to bludgeon your way through hordes of evil Nazi skinheads. And, like, it's the fact that those guys, that, like, Vettori and, well, Emmett and now Vettori,
yeah, look
sort of faintly uncanny valley in how weird they look.
Yeah.
Just makes me think, like, the protagonist from Fight Night Championship.
Is that how you would earn your way to right now? Is that how you would earn your way to a title shot? You would just fight a bunch of, like, Kelly Pavlik clones?
No, you start off in jail and you just have to fight your way out. It's a very good game. Wholly recommend it to anyone who wants to play, like, a combat sports game on any of the consoles that is incredibly old but actually still very playable. All
right, well, this has been the Heavy Hands Video Game Review Corner. And yes. Do we have anything else to say about this actual fight? I mean, here's the thing. Vettori, the durability is a problem because Kevin Holland, it seems like a fight where he would really need some occasions to hurt Vettori. I think he could hit Vettori an awful lot, though.
Mm-hmm.
Vettori is... We'll get into this, I think, also with the Arnold Allen fight, because I think Vettori has something in common with Allen here. He has a feeling of roteness, that he just can't seem to break out of. There's a certain set rhythm to the way that Vettori strikes, which I think adds to this sense of, like, consistency. Because it's like the volume never builds that much, it never diminishes that much, but it also rarely, like, takes over a fight on its own. It has to be a long attritional process before it starts to feel like Vettori is really in the driver's seat most of the time. And otherwise it's like tooth and nail up to that point. And I think part of that is is just a lack of variation in rhythm from Vettori. I said this before we started, that it sort of creates an impression of him being very short-armed, even though I don't think he is that short-armed. It's like he's really heavy on the front foot to start with, and then he throws a jab, his head's already in range, he's already planted on that front foot. It's more difficult for him to continue throwing. And there are no like feints to break up combinations, generally speaking. There's not a lot of head movement, certainly. The only head movement we saw at all from him that I can recall in that Jack Hermansson fight was leaning back. And it didn't work all that consistently. Hermansson landed plenty of shots simply by, like we've noted Hermansson's struggles with southpaws in the past, and maybe Kevin Holland shares that a bit. But simply by saying, fuck it, I'm going to trade punches, Jack Hermansson was able to hit Marvin Vettori a lot. So there will definitely be opportunities for a fighter like Kevin Holland, who's not only more of a classic boxer in terms of the sort of feel and rhythm variations that are built into his striking, but is also long-limbed and very accurate when he does box. So I think it'll be quite competitive. I think more so than the Brunson fight, simply because Vettori's takedown threat isn't quite so terrifying. Like, it's not the same feeling that, oh my God, if he gets his arms around my legs, I'm definitely going for a ride.
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably have moment to moment. I think it's going to be more competitive on the feet, as in we will have exchanges where one person will win and one person won't.
Yeah.
Whereas the Brunson fight was much more a fight of two halves, where it was just Holland getting taken down or Brunson getting hurt on the feet. But, conversely, I find myself less convinced that Holland can actually meaningfully hurt Vettori than he can Brunson. So it might just, like, his moments of success on the feet might just be, they're just, I just doubt they're going to mean as much. Similarly, as you said, like we've seen, he does like to wing right hands. I mean, this is going to be a big, rear hand throwing matchup in general, I think. Like, Vettori does have a jab. He has been well trained by Kings, but it really is a feel for the left hand. He is just the, mostly the left hand and the left kick, the sort of classic Kings change up.
Yep.
So I think we see a lot of leaning on the rear hands and then falling into the clinch. And the problem with Holland is that you have to, in order to be this guy, he has to be able to not just win in the clinch, because we said he's a good clinch fighter.
He is, yeah.
He's crafty and he's accurate, and he is at least working harder to stop people from taking him down.
Yes. But, give him some credit. Thank you for that, Phil.
But, to run this particular archetype, you just need to have inexhaustible cardio.
Yeah.
He doesn't. So you got to be like, is he going to knock Marvin Vettori out? It seems very unlikely. Can he win a decision over him, or can he make Vettori tire out with his own work? No one has really ever done that to Marvin Vettori.
Yeah.
He's fought some he'd had his best round in the third against Adesanya. Hermansson was not able to break him, and even though, Vettori was comfortably in the driver's seat for most of that fight, Hermansson still just, really, really gritted his way into that fight.
Oh, yeah.
Just, it was, Vettori does seem like a man who is, I think, aided in some ways by a profound lack of imagination.
Right.
And
he's a doer.
He was just not fazed, not tired, not shocked by the fact that Hermansson was coming out. He was just like, oh no, I will punch. I will still keep punching.
Yes. He
is still here. There was no sort of understanding that Hermansson was threatening him anymore. He was just like, no, I will just keep doing this.
Yes. He was, despite the success that Hermansson had. And a lot of it came, by the way, from Hermansson pressuring. I mean, standing your ground against Vettori, I think, is very important for getting even that kind of competitive fight out of him. Hermansson did that. He stood his ground. He came forward quite a bit as the fight wore on. And you're right. I like that framing too. I think Vettori he's not an adapter. doesn't come up with radically new ideas from minute to minute or round to round. He's the kind of guy, like, you get him in really good condition, you equip him with the most basic instructions, like, hey, we need to go forward or whatever, and he just goes out there, like, you wind him up and he just goes out there and does it. And yeah, you could imagine an arc sort of like Kevin Holland's fight with Darren Stewart. If Darren Stewart were like a less powerful puncher, but also didn't need convincing to like put on consistent pressure. And I don't know. I can imagine a tired Kevin Holland getting taken down in round 3 and chewed up with elbows, much as Darren Stewart did to him.
Yeah. It's one of the rougher ones in the division for Holland, I think. One of the ones where it's really hard to find route to victory, because you'd be like, yeah, he'd probably get tapped out by Jack Manson. He'd also have a decent chance of knocking him out. He could. I think there's a good chance he could beat, like, say, Jared Cannonier on sheer weirdness and, like, just the fact that Cannonier would give him his own fight.
Yeah. Cannonier can certainly be outboxed.
Yeah.
And Holland has one of the few things that Cannonier, one of the few effective barriers against Cannonier, in that he is himself very durable. Yeah, can I hit a hobby horse of mine real quick for, like, what I would like to see out of Kevin Holland in this fight? It's very much what I would have liked to see out of Aljamain Sterling from Petr Yan, or at least one element of that. I want to see better stick and move in MMA. Seeing it done well is so rare. That Kyler Phillips fight, for example, against Song Yadong. Like, I was really impressed by that, because in MMA, we so rarely see such a disciplined 3-round, like, I have reasoned out how I'm going to do this. I know what moves are going to work for me, and I'm constantly going to be using them to reset my position and force and turn my opponent. We have so rarely seen that done well in consistency in this sport. And the really big thing I want to see is a proper pivoting jab. Because this, to me, is the secret of fighting an evasive style of fight without conceding pressure, without giving ground. This is something you can look at fighters like boxers like Ezra Charles. Ray Robinson was so good at this. Of course, he had a legendary jab. And the key is to step into your opponent while jabbing at range, right? You step past and into them so that you are drawing, as you circle with your jabs, you're drawing a very tight circle around them. Because geometrically, it feels sort of counterintuitive, but the closer you are to your opponent when you pivot, the more they have to turn to reface you. It creates a more drastic adjustment for them. Whereas if you are circling at long range, it's a lot less efficient. You have to move a lot farther to get the same amount of rotation out of the person in the center, which means not only are you at longer range, but you just have a lot less time to capitalize on the position. Because unlike grappling, in striking and free movement, a position is a momentary, fleeting, it's a transitional thing. You don't capitalize on an angle because the other guy simply isn't looking at you. You threaten him for an instant by getting to an angle where he isn't looking at you, and then you capitalize as he's adjusting, because he's going to adjust. He's going to turn to face you. And if you do this well, if you jab, step in, and pivot around, you can create the feeling that you are constantly moving away without actually having to step backward at all. This is the kind of shit I would like to see out of fighters like Kevin Holland. It's perfectly doable in MMA, especially against a southpaw like Vettori, because the go-to counter to that kind of tactic is often the outside low kick. And Vettori doesn't have much of an outside low kick to begin with, but it's also coming off his lead leg. It's a lot less effective if you're an orthodox fighter circling towards his right. So, you know, that's just a little pet obsession of mine. I want to see more stick and move. I want to see these very fundamental, very basic tactics. You know, we're past the point in MMA's development where we're saying, how come no one jabs? Everyone jabs now. That's great. I want to see the jab paired with really good tight footwork. Because that way you can control a fight without having to come forward, because basically every MMA fight is like who gets to come forward, and without actually having to give ground and allow the opponent to come forward. So anyway,
my assertion would be to never ask for things you want to see from MMA, especially never ask to see things you want to see from MMA in the divisions above 170.
It is middleweight we're talking about here. Yeah, all right. Fair enough. Well, let's take a break.
So, one thing
mm-hmm.
is Marvin Vettori too dumb to get mad at Kevin Holland? Because I think that might actually be one of the ways to get to him, because he does seem like an extremely angry
He's very mad.
Quite dumb person.
Yeah, well, yes. That is the impression I have gotten as well. Is he too dumb to get mad? I think I don't know. I think the problem may be that he's too mad to get mad, if you know what I mean. I think he's already pissed off. And already has fights with a sense of a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, might be a good point. Too filled with fury to, for it to top it up any further.
Right. Yeah. At a
also
certain
potentially
point,
too filled with fury to pay attention and to use his brain to process what's being said.
Yeah.
It might be one of those things where he's after the fight, he's getting changed in the locker room and he's like, "Hey, wait!" The thing he said about me in there was rude.
Yeah, there's a tingle
he goes storming off to find him again.
There's the tingle in the back of his brain, which isn't a brain so much as a walnut-sized bundle of nerves around his hip, which controls his emotions. Yeah, I think at a certain point, taunting, if you're mad enough already, at a certain point, taunts are just justification for why you're mad. They just, I don't know, build confidence. So I'd be surprised. I think there's going to be some shit talking, and I would love to see how an incredibly angry Italian responds to it, as much as he understands it. But I doubt it will. I just don't think anything can. What on earth can take Marvin Vettori off the Marvin Vettori fight track?
Hopefully, we might find out.
All right. With that, let's take a break. When we come back, our co-main event, very exciting featherweight fight between Arnold Allen and Sadiq Yusuff. After that, Nina Ansarov takes on Mackenzie Dern at women's strawweight, and potentially more after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. As I type, I know people love the sound of the keyboard and the mouse. Let me just get a couple clicks in there. Hold on, I have to enter and exit full screen mode a few times. Great. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We're talking about Arnold Allen and Sadiq Yusuff. And this is an interesting one. Tell me if you feel how I feel, Phil. Like I said at the top of the show, there's just sort of a general sense here that Sadiq Yusuff is still the coming man in this division. He's more powerful. He's very durable. He's a relentless pressure fighter when he wants to be, which is more often than not these days, it seems. Just seems like at some point he's going to physically or mentally overwhelm Allen. But also maybe not. And Allen's going to make it really tough the whole way. Is that kind of how it feels to you?
Yeah, it is one of those ones where on the surface I was thinking, yeah, this is a good fight. It's well matched. Two of them are they both undefeated in the UFC?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, which is pretty rare for two guys with lots of fights in a very, very good division.
Yes.
But yeah, it seems like there's an obvious firepower disparity. Alan does not finish anyone, even aging Gil Melendez. And Yusuf is a pretty monstrous hitter.
There's also just speaking of their undefeated records, there's also a sort of undeniable sense that Yusuf's wins are just better.
Yeah.
Andre Fili, Gabriel Benitez.
And
cleaner, yes, absolutely. That's the other thing. Is Alan's always competitive, but honestly, like, Suman Mokhtarian is worse than anyone on Alan's record. But otherwise, Mike Davis, big athletic hitter, if nothing else. That was very early in Yusuf's career. Shema Moraes, likewise, a more experienced big heavy hitter. Gabriel Benitez, one of the cleverest counterpunchers in the division, dropped Yusuf at one point. And then Andre Fili, an increasingly disciplined and skilled Andre Fili. Compare that to Nick Lentz, 2019 Gil Melendez, Jordan Rinaldi, Makwan Amirkhani, and Yautsin Meza. And then a lot of these are decisions, including one split decision and a couple of close scrapes where, like, if Allen hadn't gotten a knockdown at the right moment, he probably would have lost. Or the comeback submission against Mads Burnell in a fight he was definitely losing. So yeah, there's just a feeling that
Burnell is probably his best all-around win, but he wasn't winning that fight.
Exactly, yeah, it was kind of chancy. There's just this feeling that, like, Yusuf has just been unfailingly on this track to contention the whole time, and Allen has been just coming in past the line every time. So anyway, sorry for interrupting. You were going on.
I mean, that sort of sets the table very nicely. But yeah, like, watching more tape on this, I am more curious about what we see from this. Because I think Allen's an interesting prospect in how he's developed. Because I think he is a lot like Nasrat Haqparast, as Haqparast might develop if he wasn't bailed out by his own insane athleticism.
If he wasn't cursed by power.
Exactly. The big old cliche.
Mm-hmm.
He's someone who I think Allen is actually, like Vittori we mentioned earlier, he is an angry fighter.
Mm-hmm.
He's an angry guy. I know he has gotten into trouble outside, outside the cage for getting into scraps. But you can see he is someone who is constantly kind of holding it back and trying to fight in a disciplined manner. It actually works, like, the controlled aggression works a lot better for him than if he was someone who could just, like, wallop people into submission. So where it does come out is that he'll really kind of often let himself off the hook a bit towards the end of rounds, which actually makes sense from a scoring perspective. Is that he'll often he's a pretty I don't know if he's there anymore, but he's certainly trained a lot at TriStar.
I believe he still is.
And as such, he's very much a sort of can be a bare bones fighter. He's a jab 1-2 and sometimes low kick guy. But to punctuate rounds, he will often come in and he will throw, as Rory Mack would, given the, generally Rory would do it if he had someone, that he was sure wasn't going to fight back. But, and will just kind of throw caution to the wind and come in with, like, combination of body shots, little uppercuts, so on. He'll throw a nice multi-punch combination, which leaves a good impression on the judges and, like, keeps people guessing as to whether he's still just going to keep 1-2ing them for the next round.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he is a good southpaw jabber and 1-2 threat, which is really rare and not really something that Yusuf has faced. I mean, a big dynamic of this is that basically, broadly, these guys are both strikers. Allen has been beating up on grapplers. Yusuf has been beating up on other strikers.
Yeah.
So, the dynamic should be like, Yusuf is gonna just push him out of there. But, Yusuf, and you pointed this one out, Yusuf did kind of struggle in his one matchup with a southpaw.
Yes.
In that run.
Yeah, Gabriel Benitez, who is also a southpaw who does 1-2s. He's a little more, I think, left-hand dependent than Allen, but he is absolutely a southpaw who jabs and moves and counters. And he dropped Yusuf, I think, with a 1-2, as he timed Yusuf stepping in with a kick or something, or a clinch entry. I can't recall exactly what it was, but it was a big advancing action from Yusuf that Benitez countered. And then it ended up being a counter back from Yusuf as Benitez was continuing to pressure him after that knockdown, which led to the end of the fight. So a big question here is probably Allen's durability, which seems quite good. You have to take into account what you just said, that durability has been tested so far by like a bunch of grapplers. But if you have a bad chin, and Nick Lentz lands a clean right hand on you, he'll wobble you. Likewise, Mads Burnell hit Arnold Allen with a lot of clean punches and didn't ever seem to even remotely hurt him. So you have to assume, so far anyway, that Allen is very durable and could maybe find some of the same openings that Benitez discovered.
He's just going to have to make it count with pace instead of power.
Yes.
It's going to have to be very consistent without getting countered. So another thing we were sort of talking about, neither of these guys like to feint much.
Yeah.
And Yusuf is a handsy fighter.
That sort of seems to be what makes up for the general lack of feinting. There is a bit, he will, especially when he's in pressure mode, there will be foot feints. As the opponent is giving ground, he will sort of fake his way into range. But for the most part, especially in that Benitez fight against a fellow southpaw, reaching out, grabbing the lead hand, and using that to direct his right hand into range. Allen, though, I think it's more troubling with Allen, to be honest. He very rarely feints. He's pretty much, I think that was in fact like the nail in the coffin in that the aforementioned Mads Burnell fight, which he was definitely on his way to losing before finding like a ninja choke guillotine in round 3. Which is that, Mads Burnell was able to time him over and over and over with reactive takedowns. And I think he hit, not looking at the numbers right now, but I'm going to say 5 takedowns in that fight, if not more. And basically every one he hit was successful because he was sure every time he was in range that whenever Allen was tensing up, it was an actual committed strike he was intending to throw. There was no trickery, there was no guesswork involved for Burnell when he wanted to counter Allen. Specifically countering with takedowns, because when you counter Allen with punches, he will exchange with you if he needs to. But, does the power of Yusuf change that equation? Does being able to hurt Allen with a single counter, negate the fact that Allen will always come back if you counter with strikes? The other question I have is, does Yusuf counter with takedowns? We have seen a bit of wrestling out of him, and he has been talking frequently. Basically every fight he keeps saying, I know I'll be ready to contend for the title when I start hitting triggers on my reactive takedowns. When that aspect of my game is also instinctive, then I'm going to be championship material. So I think it's probably coming at some point that he is going to be hitting opportunistic takedowns, even if just to break the flow of his opponent. The opening will be there, is all I'm saying. Allen very heavy on the front foot, more pronounced than Vettori. All the same things I was saying about Vettori apply. Very heavy on the front foot. Really doesn't feint. Really doesn't break rhythm all that often. He's got the nice combinations, but in a fight like that Mads Burnell one, where he is getting countered, both with punches and takedowns, he tends to fall back to single strikes. He can't get comfortable throwing the combinations because the first layer is being detected again and again. And yeah, not like I said, not a lot of deception to throw those counters off. So I don't know. He'll be there. I still do have the feeling that Yusuf is just going to catch him with the harder shots, and that will decide the round, given that Allen is usually like skating such a fine line anyway. But you're feeling a little more hopeful towards Allen. What are your reasons for that?
I'm just not sure I really liked how how Yusuf approached the open stance matchup. Like, yeah. I think he started with Benitez. He started to do things like pull his left hook, counter left hook in a bit more, but he was really leaning a lot on the counter right hand.
Mm-hmm.
It was the fact that he started, like, didn't seem to really know how to effectively pressure a southpaw.
Yeah.
We've seen him be a lot more aggressive in his other fights. At least building that way.
Well, he was, I'll say this. He was very aggressive right from the jump with Benitez. But about 30 seconds in, Benitez had landed a couple counters and some of those inside low kicks he's so good at. And Yusuf was, within 30 seconds, at a much longer distance with much more gradual pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, I think Allen, I'd have to look at the stats, but I think Allen's pace has actually been steadily creeping up over his fights. Because he really didn't throw all that much when he first came to the UFC, apart from the aforementioned occasional flurries. It was one of those things which got him into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I think he is still very young. He is 27. Has had, a lot of formative fights in the UFC. In a lot of ways, he's been, I think, fortunate to have gotten the matchmaking that he has. He's gotten confidence building, yet not ferociously dangerous fights.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I mean, I just think that, like, I'm not sure if I trust that Yusuf can effectively use range weapons, in the open stance matchup. Because mostly it was just waiting for the counter right hand and, like, maybe the low kick. He did use that a bunch, but he also got countered on it a ton. Like, he got punched on raw low kicks several times by Benitez.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's close enough. I'm willing to take a flyer on Allen, just because, I mean, purely because of not purely, but largely because of the open stance dynamic, and because just people with good 1-2s, consistent 1-2s from southpaw, as we've seen, are quite rare in MMA.
Yeah. Although it's odd that we've talked about two of them on this episode.
Mm-hmm.
two southpaws who just love a 1-2. Yeah, Allen does have a kicking game of his own too, although I think we've seen less of it. I actually really liked, earlier in his UFC career, we would see a teep pretty often. I'd be kind of interested to see a weapon like that against Yusuf. A good assertive anti-pressure tool could be helpful. What do you think?
He low kicked. He obviously low kicked a ton against Melendez, but that was, clearly just this is how you beat him.
Right.
Thing.
Yeah. He picked up a move from tape and just bolted it onto his game. What do you think of Allen's footwork, compared to, say, Benitez's footwork, another southpaw who does move well? Allen, he's kind of middling for me with evasive footwork.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't go completely inert when he's moving. He will keep his jab out there, at least as a distraction or an obstacle. He will change direction. He doesn't just run into the fence and then realize too late that he's run out of real estate. But he's not like a tight pivoting, he's not doing that thing that I pointed out earlier that no MMA fighters do, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's okay. I think he was turning and jabbing with, Nick Lentz. He really, and he does, I think, which is again, like a good TriStar adaptation that I think will probably serve him well in this match. As I said, Yusuf mainly made his hay with the counter right hand. He's generally fairly responsible with getting his hand or his elbow up to block right hands after he's throwing. But he does also just watch his work sometimes, and he'll just back away with his chin hanging in the air, which is, very worrying for anyone who's picking him.
Yeah, I think the front foot heaviness also, it doesn't combine well with the tendency to watch his work, or maybe it even sort of creates that tendency or the impression of it, because Allen will throw his jab already very heavy on the front foot, and his head will really come forward. And it's a great jab. I mean, it's gotten better, I have to say. The jab that he showed against Nick Lentz and Gil Melendez. Very sharp, very quick. A little more variation in timing, actually, than I've given him credit for. Certainly than there used to be. But, it does leave him just like right there. If you're just gonna come back with a counter, his head is there to be hit. And his body. Another thing, Phil, no one ever fucking does. Counter punch to the body. But, that option is wide open. If Sadiq Yusuff were to say, parry a jab, or even eat it, as we saw in the Benitez fight, he's a guy who will eat a punch and still know where you are and come back with the counter that kills you. If he were to parry or roll off a jab and then uppercut to the body with that right hand, boy, I would love to see that. So yeah, I'm gonna take Yusuff here. I think the power advantage, the pressure, and the durability combined, and especially the counterpunching. It decided things against Benitez. I think Allen is more durable, but he has also never faced a power puncher in the class of Yusuff, not even close. So, I
think that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the sort of, just one of those ones where I felt it like watching the tape. It's like, I'm not sure if Yusuff isn't just going to put himself into without most of his traditional tools, without being able to work from his jab and so on. If he doesn't put himself into a volume hole against, and then start just looking for the right hand. But I think Yusuff is probably the smart pick. But I'll take Allen on the flyer, I think.
I also do want to say, because you noted that Arnold Allen was 27 before. You know who else is 27? Sadiq
Yusuff.
Yeah. Also very young, and also with what seems to be a pretty evident athletic edge to begin with. So who knows what changes we may see out of Yusuff, or who knows, maybe it'll be a case where Allen not having that next level of power and speed, as has already sort of been the case, is forced to work harder and come up with better solutions, and Yusuff will have the Nasrat Haqparast situation a bit. There is a chance, looking at his career so far in the UFC, and most of it has been in the UFC for Yusuff, that he's going a little puncher's path. I get the slight feeling that he kind of just thinks he can walk into anyone and overwhelm them.
Like Haqparast, he is also clearly a very naturally talented grappler.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. So, but it's good, man. Arnold Allen is not going to lie down, even if the fight is clearly in Yusuff's favor as it plays out. Allen will still be there to fire shots and move, and I'm really looking forward to this one. I think it will be very entertaining. But Yusuff is the pick. By the way, was it clear that we were both picking Marvin Vettori in segment 1? I think we sort of emotionally...
It has to be, right?
Yeah. I think we made it pretty obvious, but I do think also actually saying it, that's the hard part. And I want to actually say that I am picking Marvin Vettori over Kevin Holland and Sadiq Yusuff over Arnold Allen. Okay, let's take one more break. When we come back, Nina Ansarov versus Mackenzie Dern, and possibly more, possibly not, because we're already getting pretty high on the clock here after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are going to hit these last few fights here, starting with
the aforementioned Nina Ansaroff, Mackenzie Dern. It's been a long layoff. As I said at the start of the show, Ansaroff has not fought since June of 2019, so it is coming up on a full 2 years. Quite a long time away. Imagining that we see a Nina Ansaroff who is like the Nina Ansaroff who fought Tatiana Suarez and who fought Claudia Gadelha. I do think, though, this is potentially a tough fight for Mackenzie Dern. It's the layoff that makes me wonder. What was that?
It's just a layoff. Otherwise, I would fully expect Ansaroff to slaughter her.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's my initial feeling coming in was like, oh, Dern's going to hit takedowns on Ansaroff. And like roll her over and stuff. Yeah, that's what occurred to me as I watched Ansaroff versus Suarez. The problem that Nina had with Suarez, was like a particular one to Suarez's wrestling style. Tatiana will go fully to her knees. Kind of unusual. Like, she's not really a drive takedown artist at all. She'll go fully to her knees for a really quick level change, and get a leg. And, Ansaroff was really good, actually, at sniffing those shots out in that fight. She sprawled on most of them. But what Tatiana Suarez will do is use her freakishly long arms to stay on a leg, despite the sprawl, and then just slowly but surely work her way to her feet and walk her opponent to the fence, where then the long arms become even more tricky and she can start working for lifts and dumps, and running the pipe on single legs and all that stuff from a clinch, cage wrestling position.
A little bit Kevin Lee-esque then.
Yeah, actually. In the first layer of wrestling, though, Ansaroff was effective. And I'm just not sure Mackenzie Dern has a second layer to her wrestling, or to anything that isn't jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is obviously a layer cake.
Can Mackenzie Dern do the wrestle?
Yeah. I mean, she can drop for a single leg, and like I'm thinking in her fight with Heba, she certainly went for them, but Heba seemed to have success with the same response that Ansaroff used against Suarez. You know, it was a good sprawl or a good frame right off the bat, and Dern would kind of just give up on the takedown. She doesn't have a chain wrestling, or like a reshooting kind of system as far as we've seen so far.
I mean, what we've seen from her is basically
what if Ronda Rousey had a chin?
The internal process of, I'm the master of grappling.
Yes.
I need to learn how to become the master of striking.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that has not worked out too well. She is not the master of striking, and also doesn't have a takedown game. Yeah, I mean, I've got to assume if Ansaroff is in a thing like the shape she was, she's going to tear Dern to pieces.
Well, that's the other thing. Who does Nina Ansaroff tear to pieces? Even at her best. She didn't hit that hard.
She was really...
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to be fair to Ansaroff, she has fought, like, really good opponents, generally.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Or at least generally extremely tough ones. And, like, it's worth noting, like, at the end of that Tatiana Suarez fight, Suarez was lucky that was 3 rounds.
Yeah. I guess. I don't know. Did you get the feeling there that she couldn't have... I felt like Suarez just didn't mind doing striking for most of the 3rd round because she knew she had it in the bag. That was my impression. I didn't feel that she was tired or getting hurt or anything. Ansaroff certainly had her most success, but that's largely because Suarez, I don't know, my read was she kind of allowed it to play out on the feet.
I don't know. I think she was looking... I think she was starting to struggle a bit. Yeah. I mean, but also... So the whole tearing Dern to bits thing is just... It's a bit like the old Rousey dynamic back in the day. Is that Rousey was a powerful striker.
Yeah.
But... And, you know, obviously a very, very dangerous grappler. She didn't knock people out, and she didn't, you know, as I think I've said about the Holly Holm fight before it happened, it wouldn't matter so much that Holm doesn't hit very hard because Whereas he's going to be walking into everything.
Yeah.
That's what Dern will presumably be doing, is just walking into everything. Yeah, and Ansarov is, her first layer of takedown defense is not even that sprawl, it's her footwork. And I just don't see how Dern doesn't follow her around the cage getting just pieced up.
Not a good cage cutter. Which maybe goes without saying, but not a great pressure fighter. It's all will and very little skill from Mackenzie Dern. I don't know. I think the layoff is certainly a factor in this that makes me give more weight to that will. But I'm also, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. Like Nina Ansarov, yes, very good list of opponents. All of them kind of have some quit in them, if you know what I mean. She beat Angela Hill, not all of them, but many of them. Angela Hill, at a period in her career where Angela Hill was still overthrowing and overmoving and getting tired after a round and a half. Mm-hmm. Miranda Marcos, famously inconsistent and distractible. She's got like a one-track mind, and her opponent has a lot of say in which track that mind latches onto. Claudia Gadelia, also mentally fragile, physically exhaustible. And even, maybe that says that these women stopped running into Ansarov strikes, and so that's why she didn't finish them or take over more. And if they had kept it up, she would have hurt them more and more. That's certainly possible. The Holm Rousey comparison is that holds some water. But none of these women have also just been as relentless. I haven't seen that. And a lot of the success that Ansarov has on her feet is not counterpunching. It's not running opponents into strikes. It's keeping them at bay with the footwork and with the jabs and the kicks. So I don't know. I think even on a, without the layoff, I might give Mackenzie Dern a significant outside chance to just slowly chip away at Ansarov just by refusing to go away. With the layoff? What do you think?
I've seen too many people come back from long layoffs, even completely implausible ones like Dominic Cruz, and just look fine.
Yeah,
I really struggle to find people where I'm in recent memory where I'm like, oh yeah, that was ring rust right there.
There was one not too long ago. I cannot think of it now. There certainly was one.
I win.
Julian Marquez, for example. He did win, though. He came back to win. But he looked really shitty in the first round of whatever that insane, dumb fight he had was.
So your argument is Julian Marquez?
No, that's just an example of ring rust. Are you Dominic Cruz now, Phil? You think ring rust doesn't exist? Is that your belief?
Just that I've seen it happen so infrequently, and that Julian Marquez kind of sucks. It's like Julian Marquez looked really bad in this fight, and I'm like, well, yes.
A different kind of bad. All right. A rusty kind of bad. I have seen many fighters. I'd have to go and write down names for concrete examples, but I have certainly seen lots of occasions of fighters coming back from a layoff and looking slow on the trigger, looking just easier to surprise, failing to sort of lock into the rhythm of the fight. Certainly the sense of range suffers, and the anxiety of actually being in a cage. I'll say this for Nina Ansarov. She's almost certainly been training with her wife the entire time. So that's good for her. The other thing is maybe the anxiety aspects of it don't play into it for everyone as much with the empty arenas. I don't know. I don't love X factors. I think, you know what? I might pick Ansarov though. As much as I'm arguing for Dern's relentlessness being a factor, I do feel I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate because it is some ugly ass relentlessness. It's not good. And the ease with which Amanda Hebush was able, with mostly just like first level sprawls, quick escapes, because she did get taken down once or twice, and Nina Ansarov is also very good at framing and posting and popping back up quickly. She would have done so much more if against Suarez, if Suarez wasn't such a good chain wrestler. I think Nina Ansarov can stay on the feet and and pick Dern apart.
Yeah. He bash Ansarov would actually be a really awesome fight.
It would. That would be fantastic. All right. Well, that's the rundown. Both of us picking Ansarov by the sounds of it. Should be competitive, though. I mean, say what you will about Mackenzie Dern. Gentlemen, please don't say whatever you will, but always entertaining. Can't argue that she's not going to bring just the craziest, stupidest fight possible to her opponent.
Whatever else you say about her, she has a absolute ton of grit.
Absolutely. Yes. That's what I said right at the start. I don't know if you heard me, but she sort of asks and answers the question, what if Ronda Rousey, like, mentally and physically had a chin? She could take it. And, it turns out that it's not much prettier, at least as far as the striking goes, but it is crazier and it usually lasts all 3 rounds. So how about the main card opener here? Mike Perry, Daniel Rodriguez. What do we think of Mike Perry at this stage in his career? The man's life is combusting outside the cage. He's truly going insane.
Yeah.
He's losing his shit. He's getting into random bar fights. He's like, Mike Perry has such like a, I don't know. He has like he's such a dude energy. There's a certain type of guy where he's like, oh, I broke up with my ex. I'm now shacked up with like some 19-year-old. We're madly in love, but we also have an incredibly dysfunctional, torturous relationship in which we're both of us rarely happy. But when we are happy, we think we're really, really happy. I don't know. He's just like driven by his emotions in a way that only men are. Like he's Hunter Biden. That's what he makes me think of. He's just like a dumbass who's just running around, like getting high, having what he thinks are deep thoughts, but which are in fact incredibly insipid and just slinging dick. That to me is Mike Perry in a nutshell. And it is starting to wear on him, I think. In addition to the ruthless fighting schedule, he is losing his grasp and quickly becoming, in fact, a horrible man as he disintegrates. More than any of that, though, he hasn't been looking that good in the cage. I think he's deteriorated more than ever before in his recent performances. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, he's become he used to be looking like he could be a simple but effective kind of pressure counterpuncher.
Yeah.
But now he's just pretty much a swinger. Rodriguez is a genuinely pretty good counterpuncher.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we saw in his last fight where Rodriguez lost a decision to Nicholas Dalby, which I frankly thought he won.
Yeah.
But he also deserved to lose, if that makes sense. Because I just looked at it and saw, Daniel Rodriguez, twice the size of Nicholas Dalby, just sitting there being like, give me something to counter. Give me something to counter.
Yeah.
Give me something to counter. And Dalby just kicking air in front of him. And somehow racking up rounds. And that's not going to be a problem with Mike Perry. Unless Mike Perry has been broken in some unique and new way. He's like, you know what?
Oh my God. I would love
technical Mike Perry.
Yes. I so want to see technical Mike Perry. I so want to see a Mike Perry who just refuses to lead and moves around. I want to see him take exactly the track that Alex Hernandez has taken.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
he won't. He'll get mad and he'll come forward and Rodriguez will clock him and he'll get mad from being clocked and then he'll get clocked again and he'll end up losing either a brutal decision or a sort of mid-fight knockout.
Yeah, unfortunately for Perry, Rodriguez is also quite a dangerous clinch fighter in his own right. So it's not even Perry's reckless just barreling forward isn't even going to get him to a range where he is safely in control. And also his clinch hasn't looked good for several fights now. It hasn't really been that sort of back pocket threat that it was before. He got absolutely chewed up on the counter by Tim Means, who is accurate and smoother than Rodriguez. though at this point, not that much quicker, if at all, and certainly a lot less powerful.
Well, he was knocked out himself by Rodriguez.
Right. Yeah.
The counter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it just goes to show you, like, Rodriguez pretty much does the things that Perry would like to do.
Yeah.
Outside of the aggression.
So here's the real question. Here's the real question. Can Rodriguez wrestle? How good is his grappling?
Oh, what, you reckon we get Wrestler Perry?
We have to. How do we not get that? He's going to crash into him. He's going to get hit in the clinches. The man grappled with Mickey Gall. He's absolutely going to try to grapple with Daniel Rodriguez.
I mean, it's hard to say, but Rodriguez's style, like, it's so very heavy, very handsy. He just looks like he is, like, because we haven't really seen any really good wrestlers going after him.
Yeah.
He looks like a very good counter wrestler.
He seems sturdy.
His weight is like, his hips are back, his shoulders are forward. He's grabbing hold of people as soon as they get near him. He's very good in the clinch.
Yep.
Dalby's an all right wrestler. He got nothing done in the clinch or the wrestling exchanges.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's another rough matchup for the disintegrating Mike Perry.
Hey, you know what? Given how he's been acting and the things he's been accused of outside the cage, I finally started to enjoy the Mike Perry downfall, and I'm ready for Act 3.
I'll agree.
Okay, last one we want to touch on. We'll make it pretty quick here, but bantamweights, Hunter Azure versus Jack Shore. Of course, Jack Shore has some hype, as it seems once every 8 years we get a prominent prospect out of the UK. Congratulations to you guys over there, Phil. You're really just nailing it.
We're killing it, yeah.
And Jack Shore is the latest one of those, a Welsh guy, a Welsh boy, in fact. If you look at him next to a fighter like Hunter Azure, who has become one of my pet interests. I'm hoping that I'll have the magic touch yet again. That in singling out Kevin Holland, clearly I single-handedly made him the star that he now is. Bilal Muhammad is starting to get main event fights. I'm claiming sole responsibility for that as well. And I'm hoping that I can use my Lathe of Heaven powers to maneuver Hunter Azure into contention. He's a relatively high level collegiate wrestler. He's 29 years old, but pretty raw and pretty young in his MMA career. He's got big power, and he is developing the bare bones of a good striking game under John Crouch. Everything so far is still pretty loaded up. There's a lot of the kind of gaps and moments where you can sort of see what he's thinking between exchanges. But when he comes out with his strikes, I like what he's putting out there so far, which is what really caught my eye, in fact, is seeing an athletic young wrestler under John Crouch, who is a coach that I really respect, and B, seeing this young power puncher hit the body a ton. So far, I've had my eye on Azure as a developing prospect. So what do you make of his matchup with Jack Shore?
It's a really, really difficult one to figure out because Shore, for all that the level of wrestling and grappling has increased on the UK scene, the European scene in general, it is still, being an effective wrestler is still a bit of a secret weapon. And Shaw is primarily a very good wrestler. At least by, UK standards. We've seen a bunch of times that doesn't really quite translate to the UFC. Most of the UK fighters who have developed into like strong wrestlers have done so in the UFC and have kind of rarely like hit the top tier. You know what I mean? So I'd pick it an example of someone who was a good but not fantastic MMA wrestler. And then there's like Leon Edwards, who pretty much developed his wrestling game inside the UFC. He came in as just like a one-punch knockout guy.
There is Volkanovski, who hails from a part of the world known only as Europe too.
Very true.
But Australia has the same problem where you don't expect a good wrestling ability, and yet Volkanovski goes against the mold. It's another circuit, is what I'm saying, where the barest amount of wrestling will often get you surprisingly far.
So Shaw is he's fairly well rounded. He's not. He doesn't athletically blow you away.
No.
Primarily dependent, as I said, on a wrestling and top game, which is genuinely quite good.
Yes.
So but the fact that like Trazia is a visibly bigger, more powerful person with a NCAA wrestling background, you'd think, do I really trust Jack Shaw to like outstrike him on the feet or win enough wrestling exchanges over the course of this fight? I think I probably have to pick him to win it. As you mentioned, Hunter Xia he's just clunky.
Yeah.
Like he makes positional errors even when he is effectively wrestling the other person. Shaw is not just he's not just a good wrestler. He is a genuinely good grappler.
Mm-hmm.
Can definitely see Azir like giving up his back. But I think it's one of these ones that it could be pretty tough. I think it's going to have to be, Shaw will have to show some genuine quality here, whether it's on the feet or on the ground. I don't think it's not just going to be another one of these ones where he's just going to hit a double leg and then immediately just be dictating for the rest of the round.
Yeah, I mean, sure, he's in a difficult position for us analysts because, I mean, we're in a difficult position looking at him because, like you said, he has a really well put together game. Whoever conspired with him to arrange the system of boxing setups for takedowns and vice versa, has done a good job. There's a good process there, is what I'm saying. And, unfortunately for me, that means that, I see Jack Shore at a relatively low level, just hitting clean reactive takedowns on people. And I have yet to see a lot of instances of somebody like shutting down the first layer of his wrestling so I can see what he does in that instance. It's a lot of him just getting to the right position instantly. And yeah, like that, it's a two-sided thing because that speaks to his preparation and his skill set. But, you know, it's like a weird parallel to having too much power that I don't get to see the rest of your game. He's just good enough that I haven't seen him pushed in the ways I feel I need to see him pushed to be confident about a fight like this. I don't know. We were laughing before about the fact that Jack Shore's nickname is apparently Tank. He's just not a tank. And Hunter Azure definitely is. He's short, he's stocky, but he's broad and powerful and hits hard. And, he's the kind of fighter who, like, his clunkiness isn't quite the drawback it seems like it should be because he is himself equipped with a lot of the right ideas so far. You know, he gets hit clean, but he will come back and counter. He's not going to get hit by the same thing over and over. And he will diligently work attritional shots. We also saw, after that knockout loss to Brian Kelleher, he was a lot more insistent with his own wrestling in a comeback fight with Cole Smith. And, you know, was able to like ride out a lot of positions against the cage, was able to ride Smith out in headlocks. And it was the kind of mat wrestling that I feel I haven't really seen a lot of from Shore just yet. I might pick Azure. I don't have any particularly strong reason to do so. But I'm just not sold on Shore against this kind of physicality. And I am also sort of expecting to see, or at least hoping to see Azure turn a corner technically, at some point as a striker.
Oh no, I understand. Makes sense. I will pick the British people. You'll pick the Americans.
That's right. And I will be right.
Damn you.
All right. Well, that is it for this week's UFC card. You can kind of tell everything you need to know about it by the fact that we talked about officially one of the 9 prelims scheduled for this bout. Thank God that 8 or 9 of these people will get sick and pull out of their fights. Hopefully before tomorrow. before I have to preview them with Zane, which, Phil, you always love to tease me with. Anything to plug this week?
Sadly, nothing I can think of that I have either read or have coming myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say that on the Patreon, we will have a couple things coming to you this month. Phil, you and I recorded a heavy bag. It was like an hour long of us answering questions from our patrons. I have yet to post that, so that should be coming this week. In fact, hopefully, yell at me, listeners of the show, if it's not up on the Patreon by the time this episode is available. In addition to that, though, Kyle McLaughlin and I recorded commentary for 2 Marvin Hagler fights, which will also be posted, I like to think, this week. And next weekend, Kyle has already committed to, granted, there may be a reschedule, but my friend Kyle has committed to coming on to watch Estrada versus Chocolatito Gonzalez 2, which are 2 of my favorite fighters. Especially, I love Juan Francisco Estrada. Everyone loves Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. And their first fight was a goddamn classic. And from everything I've heard, the second fight completely lived up to expectations, if not exceeded them. I heard it was a barn burner. So Kyle and I both are big fans of those 2 fighters. Both of us, despite that, have not seen it yet. So we're going to have our first viewing of that fight together. That should be coming in addition to all that other stuff I mentioned to the Patreon in the near future. So make sure you sign up there, support us for $3 a month. You get access to all those bonus episodes. And that's it.
The lost episode of the Historical Perspective is coming out as well.
Yes, right? It is. It's, at some point. I'm editing it or something. At this point, should I even post it, Phil? It's almost like it would be giving up on the myth. It's becoming a legend because it is here.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those things like Duke Nukem Forever or something, where the actual product can never live up to the legend of what this show actually was.
At this point, it can only be a crushing disappointment. The actual nonsense discussion that we had for 3 hours. There's a reason I didn't post it off the bat. But hey, who knows? If I get a dry spell next month, maybe it'll be coming then. Or maybe I'll just, I don't know, get slightly drunk some night this month and post it on a whim. All right. Thank you all for listening. Anyway, until that happens, find us on social media, Twitter specifically. You can find Phil at Evil Greg Jackson, myself at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. And once again, thank you all for listening. And to those of you who support the Patreon, keep your eyes out for those upcoming bonus episodes. We hope you've been enjoying all that Patreon content we've been putting out lately. Till next week, when we will be discussing Whitaker versus Gastelum. Very interesting. Thank you all for listening again. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.